Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Live Sound Podcast. If you have seen any of the previous episodes, then thanks for coming back. If this is the first one, then thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy it. This week, we've got an incredible guest, Kevin McCarthy, known as Tater, monitor engineer for a lot of the world's biggest rock bands. He's got an amazing CV, and we mainly delve into the psychological side of monitor engineering and the communication and how best to interpret your artist needs and provide that. I think it's a really interesting journey to the other end of the multi-core, and I hope you all enjoy. So without further ado, take it away, Tater. Thank you. So welcome to the Live Sound Podcast. I have with me here today Tater, monitor engineer for now every rock band in the world. How are you doing today, my friend? All right?
Not too bad considering the circumstances. Thanks, Ben.
Good. So we'll get straight into it. If you want to give people a kind of a brief rundown of some of your bigger clients and who you've been with in the past, and what you were what you were supposed to be doing right now, and hopefully going to be doing once this all lifts.
Yeah. Well, we're supposed to be doing Iron Maiden right now. We're supposed to be in Australia in rehearsals. And last year I had done my first tour with Iron Maiden, and I was very excited. They wanted me back. I was getting ready to go do that. Previously, it'd be 34 years this August for me touring, so it's been quite a while. But as you know, me and you did Don Broco together, had quite a lot of fun. Great bunch of guys. But, I've done mainly rock acts in my career, from, Alice Cooper, who I worked with, over 10 years, and Judas Priest I worked for like almost 10 years, and 13 years plus with Linkin Park, and more currently with Mike Shinoda solo tours. But, I've done everybody: Kid Rock, Godsmack, Puddle of Mud, Kiss. The list goes on through the years.
So how did you get into it all then?
Fairly easy start. I played in a band in high school. In order to play out, we needed a PA system. I got a little bit more involved in the PA I did than in the band. The PA was making some money, and I was in it with a friend of mine, Jeremy, and his dad had moved to Texas. And so when he moved to Texas on a whim, he goes, "Hey, I'm going to go apply for – we're only 1 year out of high school. He goes, I'm going to go apply for a job at Shoko." I don't know if a lot of people out there remember Shoko, but they were one of the biggest sound companies out there before Claire purchased them. And he got the job, and he invited me down there as soon as I wanted to. He'd get me in, but it took me a bit. I was making some money with the PA system, and I finally had an offer to sell it. And so I sold it. I had nothing tying me in, so I took the job down there, and I worked there from 87 to 90. Worked there 10 years, 87 to 97.
I'm assuming that's how you fell into touring then, working through those guys.
Yeah. So the big time touring, I was working for another band, Detroit, and we were doing these very small little Canadian tours, but that is the only kind of touring I had done at all before I went down there, and then just kind of thrown right into it. So right into the big league and sink or swim, So that's how that kind of unfolded.
As a front of house engineer, or did you start as a monitor engineer? How did you make that shift?
No, I did mainly, I guess, front of house. Back then we were doing monitors from front of house. Then when we got a split and kind of stuff like that, I got a little bit more into the monitors, because I think mainly I was up there, kind of vibe, and fell into it from just being up on stage doing the stuff and then dialing in the monitors. And I think I fell more part of it up there, and I just always gravitated towards it. I haven't really ever really done front of house really since then, but a handful of times.
So more the connection with the musician actually being part of the show up on stage.
Yeah, and probably no one else wanted to do it. I'm like, I don't care, I'll do it. So, you know what I mean? I think that's kind of how it probably originally happened. But I just I took to it. I liked it, and I thought there was a pretty good connection. So I just kind of stayed with it.
So I think for me, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about was obviously not away from gear, and really away from a kind of technical skill set, is obviously being a monitor engineer, as you say, being up there, dealing with the artist. it's obviously all about relationship with the artist and understanding them, and it goes a lot further than just turning up what they want in their ears or the wedge or whatever, but learning, the guys who you need eyes on, learning how to respond back to them, learning their commands to you, and again, obviously just making them feel comfortable and confident on stage. And how do you find switching between various different artists? Obviously, I know you work for a lot of different people, but how do you first initiate that first point of contact to the band, and then how best to communicate with them?
That's a great question, because you do have to approach, even if you look at my resume and the bands I've listed, it's mainly the hard rock bands I've worked for mainly my whole career. But I always approach them one way. I'm all ears, not just when I'm mixing, but I'm all ears when I'm listening to them. That's the main thing. I don't try to ever talk over them, tell them what I want them to hear. I listen to them, and I listen to exactly what they say, and I try to mainly do the listening there and not the talking, and not I want to hear exactly what they say. I want to take it all in and then adapt it from there. I'm not trying to, I'm employed by them. I'm not trying to be friends with them. You know what I mean? I'm strictly business relationships usually with all the bands I work with. And I try to keep it that way. And that's really what I do. It's basically make sure you listen to everything they're saying and try to interpret it the best you can. And hopefully that works. But it's really just about listening and paying attention, and keeping your eyes on the money out there, and keep it, and make sure not just that, but make sure everybody's getting the same attention, especially when you're working for a band full of rock stars and not just one main principal. Making sure they're all getting the attention from you that they need, and not just one person. And also, listening to their texts. The texts are, an extension of them. When you come in new, I found this especially with Iron Maiden. When you come in new to established group like Iron Maiden, talking to their texts a lot of times are very good and know what they want to hear, and can get you dialed in way before they get in there and give you a good bass. So not just listening just to the artist, but to their text, and to me, that's the best way of approaching it. But just listening to them is basically.
Are you finding the text mainly are on their artist mix, or are you doing a separate?
Yeah,
mix? Is it
they usually are.
Talks mixed into them.
Yeah, they're usually on their artist mix, or they have the ability to be on it.
Yeah.
So
they use hearing what they're sounding, so they can guide you in the right direction before the artist.
Correct. Yeah. So that's kind of my main concept.
So how do you initially then you pick up a brand new artist like let's say Iron Maiden? I mean, for one, there's more than 3 or 4 guys on stage. There's a lot about there's a lot of movement in that show as well. I'm assuming with the amount of stage set that you take, you're not obviously always in the optimal position. So at what point are you sitting down with the band and saying, right, here's how we communicate? Is that something you pick up over time, or is that something you pick? With each particular guy and the artist, 1 or 2 things they're going to need, and work out hand signals or whatever. Like how are you getting to that point of easy communication with them?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I don't mix all the band. I mix everybody but the bass player, Steve Harris. So my buddy next to me, Gonzo, Steve Smith, he handles everything for Steve Harris. So he's obviously deadlocked on Steve. And you bring up the set. I mean, the main thing is seeing over the set, me and Gonzo, and that only gives me view of the guys on the stage. I can't see the drummer at all. So I did adopt the video guys were nice enough to give me a video shot of Nico, the drummer, and I put that on my SD7 on the screen there. And he has a lot of cues, so it's good to see me hitting him and missing him with his facial expressions in that camera. And then the other guys, I'm peeking over the set, standing on on a case lid to see the rest of the guys. Bruce is easy to see. He's usually up on the set and running around. I can keep a good track of him. The hardest one is Yannick, who's the closest to me. So he's usually in the set there, but he'll peek over and talk to me. Or they all have talkbacks at their tech stations. They'll usually come back between songs and say something, and they'll call me on the talkback, and we'll do it that way.
Yeah. And do you feel, obviously, your communication back to them is obviously a particularly important thing, and do you feel that again differs between artists, or do you know, are you just try to be as clear and concise as you can going back to those guys?
Yeah, we try to keep all that communication obviously to a minimum. There's a lot going on, so yeah, we definitely try to just what you need. Yep, got it. And they'll come back, more or less or something. Yep, got it. And usually, I got to say, usually when the artist asks for a change, something like that through their tech, they'll usually give me look over and give me a thumbs up or something like that, knowing that the change has been made. Usually how it goes, or give me a head nod or something, and I'll know it's right.
Bringing something in, you can see. When
I can see him kind of. Yeah, yeah. A lot of years studying people's behaviors, you can figure it out, that they're good now. So,
and that kind of understanding, not just the physical communication, but actually understanding the artist as well, and obviously instilling their confidence. I mean, obviously, that happens in the front of house world when you first pick up a job. Obviously, it's the interesting part because nobody in the band actually can hear what you're doing, and obviously that kind of everybody in the crew, from the monitor engineer to the lighting guy, can flash out of time, or the bus driver or the caterer, anybody can screw up. The front of house guy screws up unless someone tells the band, they don't know. So obviously that kind of trust and that confidence comes from other people telling them, whereas obviously with the monitor guy, straight from day one, they're instantly hearing what you're doing. So it's I'm assuming that's the big instilling that confidence in the artist, and basically, essentially, I suppose you want to almost become invisible, that they can just come on and everything's done. They don't have to think about it. And in that case, I suppose an uneventful show is a great show for you.
I always say an uneventful show is always the best. You just want it to go the same as the other night. That hopefully that went well. And Iron Maiden, a lot of bands I work for. I mean, Judas Priest, Cooper, Linkin Park. I mean, never sound check. So you throw a lot of confidence in the backline guy, a lot of confidence in the system engineer, the front of house guy, and to get it right every day. So when they hit that stage, it's kind of like always the same for them. So that's a big thing is making sure that that's right. There's no doubt about it. And to have that confidence, not to be able to sound check and know we can get it done, and they don't need to come in early and all that kind of stuff. But consistency is the key in monitors. That's definitely that keeps your job. There's no doubt about it.
How did you approach? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming, as with all things, most of your artists are now on in-ears. But going back to Wedge days, how did you achieve that consistency? Obviously, with say for example, with a band not sound checking and a much more open space and everything. Obviously, wedges in different venues completely and utterly change. So without the artist being on stage, did you have any little tips and tricks or anything you did to kind of achieve that consistency? So when they came on last night and you were outdoors, and tonight you're in an arena and whatever, but they still have that sound, that familiar sound of the wedges in front of them.
Yeah, I guess when I started with Judas Priest, I think that's a good one, or maybe even Alice Cooper. Priest weren't on ears a lot then. Alice definitely was. It was middle 90s. I don't think anyone was using them. I'm not. That's a good question, because I don't think I had any tricks or anything I was doing. And I definitely think the bands I work for, we bowl it over with sheer volume and power, a lot of times. And I think the artists back then were more in tune to that, like knowing the changes were going to come in buildings and stuff like that. And I think that helped, where nowadays with ears, they want it to sound the same every day. and all that stuff. Where I think back then they kind of didn't. And it's funny you mention that because last year was my first year with Iron Maiden, and Bruce is just so smart. We would talk every once in a while, and he'd be like, "Oh, no, I remember this venue. This venue's bad. This one's good." He remembers them all and knows them, and he'd tell me we're gonna have a great run of 4 or 5 shows because these are great buildings and stuff like that. So I think they kind of have, especially the ones that've been around for a while. I think they kind of have they've been doing it enough and they've been there enough, and I think they know what to expect.
So even nowadays when everyone's on ears,
obviously
still venue acoustics and things and slapbacks and all that kind of stuff still has a huge effect on you. So how are you, as a front of house engineer would walk around the room, work out what's the room, what's the PA, whatever, find out how many tickets you've sold, have the educated guess of how the room's going to change and mix accordingly, assuming you're doing that for your in-ears as well, and in which case what kind of, I know some people like the front of house to be turned off for half a song so the band can hear it tightened up, or what are you kind of doing to almost anticipate that and leave yourself a bit of wiggle room to compensate for how the room's changing?
Yeah, that, because just because you have in-ears doesn't mean they don't sound different because of a room. That's for sure. They definitely do. I tell you, the main thing is I always say to make it sound consistent is the systems engineer out front and the front of house guy. If that system is put up and deployed right every day in an arena, I usually always have a listen while they're playing their normal songs that the front of house guys, whatever they play, I'll walk around with my ears in, have a listen. I kind of judge it that way, especially the low end. I'll bring the systems engineer up here and say, this is just unacceptable today, or this is and this isn't, and this is great, or there's not enough. And working with the system.
The back of the subs as a part of your mix.
Yes. The back pressure of the PA, the back pressure of the subs. If that can be consistent, you're going to be consistent. So working with the front of house, it's not just, and then turning the PA on and off. The band's never going to hear it off, so I need it on all the time. You know what I mean? So having it off doesn't really help unless they were going to play with it off. We know that's not going to happen. And so I try to walk around, so I can do it together with the front of house team to make sure that it's consistent. And if I have any questions or anything, I can ask them. We'll sort it out then. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And also with me and Pooch been doing virtual sound check together. I think that's a big help. He runs it and it comes through the monitor desks and hits the stage. I think that's a big help. And the biggest one is, since we don't sound check, we have a crew jam, and I'll walk it the whole stage then, and then walk the vocal and just kind of dial it in from there, really. But I'd say that the top thing is working with the system engineer and the front of house guy to get the consistency of those guys are flying the PA the same every day, stacking the subs the same way every day, and getting that consistent back pressure really is the key for me.
2 things from that. First thing, interesting you say about virtual sound check. Is that something that you're using for the in-ears mix, or are you using that for stage sound, i.e. side fills, anything like that? How are you utilising that when he's running virtual at front of house?
Yeah, we're using it. It's coming out everywhere. Using it for the ears and for any conventional speakers with Maiden. We still have 3 guys on ears, and there's still speakers everywhere in the set, on the set, downstage. They're everywhere. So we run the virtual playback that Pooch is doing through that. To listen to everything, and then we usually have the backline guys come on and go from there, play a song or two, song and a half, and we usually can get it pretty close so everybody's pretty happy.
Amazing. And secondly, you talk about working, obviously, working with the front of house, and I know certainly with Pooch, you've obviously done a lot of stuff together, and we all try and have our wingman that we like to tour with. The one thing that's not touched on a lot is obviously the importance of the relationship between the front of the house guy and the monitor guy. And especially for me, the one thing from being a front of house guy, I always try and make sure I speak to a monitor engineer and work out, because there's obviously so many people who kind of storm in and be right, I use this, and this. And I think what's often overlooked is obviously the monitor engineer is trying to achieve their 10 out of 10, but you're sharing the same microphone, you're sharing the same positioning, you're sharing all that stuff. You know, how important and who's making those calls? I suppose it depends. You know, it depends on the person. But you know, how much do you rely on that? And how much do you communicate with the front of house guy and that kind of stuff?
You know, that's a great question, especially nowadays with you know, the mic choices and all that stuff's obviously usually front of house, and if not, you're putting a second one up. You know, and
because front of house is far more forgiving when you're putting something that's on that artist's instrument. If there is, like you say, it is an interesting thing that the front of house guy makes that call.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, the mic choices. You know, I asked you about a couple of mics you were using I'd never used before on Don Broco that I quite like. I usually don't have too much of a problem with them. I mean, the microphones everybody's putting out there now are really, really, really good. So I don't usually have too much of an issue. You know, and a lot people also forget a lot of mic choices aren't really dependent on what somebody likes. It's due to space, an endorsement deal. I can't fit this one in this area. This guy's got to have this one on here. So it's not always just what the front of house guy likes. There's so many other kind of options out there, things you have to do because those overheads, now they can't go there because it blocks the camera, sight line, all that kind of stuff. So those choices are made for a lot more reasons than just maybe the front of house guy. So I don't mind if it's something really I don't like. We'll throw another one up there. That rarely happens, but I have done that before. But that's basically how it kind of works, at least with me and Pooch. But I try to go with what they have, and I'm usually pretty good with it. If it comes down to something, we'll discuss it, and I'll probably lose, but that's fine. And I'll make it somehow. I'll make it work. You know.
Going back to something you said that I wanted to ask you about on the Iron Maiden stage, that you still have a lot of speakers. You've still got wedges, side fills, drums, something like that. How are you approaching, for example, a guitar player who's got in-ears in? He stood in his sweet spot between his cab, his wedges, with his in-ears in. When he moves around, which obviously, you know, bands like Maiden, everything with huge stage sets, and they're moving everything, is that just something that they know that the sonics of are going to change, or are you doing things to chase their in-ears mix? Potentially when you see someone move to the other side of the stage, you know they're missing something. Are you compensating for that?
Luckily with Iron Maiden, I'm not compensating for that because all three guitar players are on in-ears. So I'm not compensating for them that much, and their wedges are basically feel in the front for kick, snare, and hat, and maybe a little bit of themselves and some vocal, and that's really about it. So when they move around, luckily, knock on wood, I don't have to chase them around in the mixes or anything like that. It's more Bruce. But I do know that Gonzo's doing that with Steve. Steve's not on in-ears. He's on all conventional side fills and wedges. And I do know Gonzo does do that for Steve. And I'm doing that with, even though he's not moving, I just have a lot of cues for Nico.
Yeah, amazing. So
I have had before.
That leads me on to my next question with cues and things like that. Obviously, snapshots, things like that. Obviously, I'm assuming you are now with something possibly not Maiden, but let's take for Linkin Park, for example, heavily electronic. A huge amount of stuff going on. Again, a lot of guys on stage. How much are you relying on snapshots? Are you one song, or are you individual parts of songs? And what are the kind of things that you're changing there?
I try to always do one snapshot per song, cues in the middle of the song. I want to manually do every day, just because of, like you say, the room, whatever other factors are in there. I'm not looking for a specific movement. I'm looking for a specific sound, because every cue I'm on, I'm listening to. So I mainly do one per song. I may have to do two, no more than that. I'm trying to mix it within the scenes. But yeah, I mean, Maiden is just basically some on-offs, stuff like that. Linkin Park, much more intricate in the queuing and snapshot system, obviously. Lots of ons, offs, fader movements to certain points, all that kind of stuff for every song, multiple stuff going on. Every band member had their own individual channel for playback reference. So there was a lot going on there.
What kind of channel count and mix count are you on with something like that then?
We were up to about 112 at one point, and I think we worked it down right below 100 on the last tour, somewhere maybe in the 92 range or something like that. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts, pieces coming in and out. But they had cut a few songs that required a lot more inputs in the later years, and we were lucky to reel it back in a bit.
Amazing. So obviously with something like that, muscle memory and having the right gear in front of you is extremely important. So we'll talk about gear for a bit at the moment.
Yeah.
I know you're a Digico and Waves man. How did you first get involved in that? Have you been with Digico since the move from analog?
No, not at all. I used a Harrison SM5 for, first 10, maybe 15 years of my career. Then went to probably a Heritage 3000, and we're doing Judas Priest one year, and Martin Walker says, "Man, you got to use this PM5D." It must have been around, I can't remember what year, early 2000s maybe. He says, "You got to use this thing. I'm using one. You need to use one." I'm like, "Martin, man, I want to get out of this business before these digital consoles come out." He's going, No, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. So I loved it, and he ended up not using it. So I ended up using the PM5D for quite a long time, probably longer than most people would have. I had to use a DSP5D for a while because I couldn't get the channel count, and I was faking outputs and all kind of stuff. And finally, it was it. I couldn't use it anymore. And me and Pooch was on at the time, was on a profile. So we were going to make a switch, and we were looking at SSL at the time. But it was so new. We just weren't sure. And of course, James Gordon called, and he said, No, you're using Digico. That's what you're using. And, it's hard to turn down James. So we both went to SD7, and we haven't looked back. I love it. It does everything you ever want it to and more. You can sit there and program that thing to do stuff for days. So I got involved that way with Digico. And with Waves, Pooch was, he was working there, and we were doing a Slash tour. And he brought me a server and a couple plugins, and on that same thing, I've never looked back. Now, I don't use a ton of it. I have a certain chain I use on my outputs and a few things on vocals and stuff like that, and that's about really all I use. But I love it, and I don't want to not use it. It's kind of a sound I've created for PSM 1000 through Waves to get my starting point. And then, recently I've adapted Clang now for the last probably 3 years now.
Yeah, but I was going to say, I know you've been involved in those guys.
Yeah. And, Digico's purchased them, so it's all integrated now, and I really love that product. I think I started first on Linkin Park, and those guys absolutely, they're big technology guys anyways. They loved it. And then, I thought on Maiden, well, I'm really not going to get really chance to really use that tool. And then I found out that tool really helped me out with the guitar players, because those guys' ear mixes, I always think there's a couple different ways to look at how somebody wants to hear an ear mix. There's some guys that only want to hear in their ears what they can't hear acoustically. Let's say a drummer. If he can hear his snare, he doesn't want a lot of snare in there. There's guys that only want stuff to hear that that they're missing out on. So they got some kind of weird kind of mix that's just them needing the basics to do their job.
Unless you got the other, and the kit doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Then you got the other guys that are the full spectrum. They want the full CD stereo sounding mastered mix in their head and everything kind of in between. So once you kind of figure out where that guy's coming from of how he wants to listen and what kind of he's trying to accomplish there in his mix, I I kind of figured with Iron Maiden, I was going, oh, well, these guys, once again, some, guys have been around for a while, and they were really wanting to hear the stage sound in their ears, not this pristine CD mix of everything, but just how they used to hear it with the wedges, but in their ears. And once I started using the clang and kind of threw the back line behind them instead of left and right to them, and then it all came together from there. They were hearing their amps kind of from behind them, not in front or the sides, kind of positioned everything, the drums kind of over and back a little bit, all in that line with clang. It all came together, and they were pretty happy from then on out.
Amazing. So obviously, as you say, with the wave stuff and the clang stuff, the technology is obviously a huge part of any job. But how was the initial move from you when obviously everybody's going from wedges to in-ears, and then obviously RF becomes an extremely important part of part of a monitor engineer's job, which short of radio mics and things like that, before it necessarily wasn't. So how was that something that you really kind of knuckled down and really wanted to get involved? Obviously, at certain levels, you then have your tech who's obviously coordinating all your RF and looking after that. But on the smaller stuff, and I'm assuming when it first came in, was that something that you spent a lot of time getting to grips with?
Well, when it first came in, no, because we had VHF. It was all clean. You had, radio mic that maybe had 4 channels on it, or when Shure PSM 600 came out, you only had 2 channels. It was one worked, the other one did, you use the other one, so it was easy then. And then, it's increasingly gotten harder, but the technology they're coming out with now is starting to make it easier to get clean channels. On Linkin Park, I never had to do any of the RF. I had my assistant Paul White did all that, but lately on tours, even on Iron Maiden, I'm doing the RF for everybody myself, which I don't mind. Somehow it fell on the monitor engineer's shoulders, I guess, because that stuff sits next to him, So our RF kind of fell in that position. You have to do it now and understand it. I just look at it like, okay, it's part of my job. I got to know it, learn how to do the software and that kind of stuff, and know what to look for and get it done, and make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. The Shure software is, and their gear is absolutely fantastic for that stuff. So yeah,
backups and contingency and things like that. Are you running separate units, or if you're in the PSM 1000, are you using backup frequencies? And to what extent are you backing up? Do you have just a spare mix fed from Matrix, or do you have spare mixes, spare frequencies for everybody? Or
I do it. It depends. I do it a couple ways. Microphone systems. I always have a main and a backup on a switch, so it's coming down the same channel. I never want to have to call you at front of house. Hey, Ben, we're on the other mic. Well, you're trying to do a delay, and you got to turn on and unmute another channel and throw a fader up, whatever. I don't even want you to know that the mic went down or it's bad. I'm going to hit a switch, and I don't want the front of house guy to even think about it.
Yeah.
So I have Iron Maiden and Linkin Park. I have a 4-way switch that'll go to 4 different microphones, all separate frequencies, and I'll go that route on everything I do with a wireless. I'll have a switch, so I do it, and hopefully I'm the only one that even knows about it. So then on in-ears, I do it a couple different ways, depending on how much gear I have and all that kind of stuff. I like to do everything off of Matrix. So if it goes down, it's new everything. It's a new pack. It's a new frequency, which has new batteries and all different cables and different output sockets on the stage. Everything is different at that point if I go down a Matrix.
You're just
right?
replacing the entire signal flow.
You're replacing the whole. You're not worried about any. It doesn't matter. We're replacing the whole thing. They're getting the duplicate mix off the Matrix, and it's all new everything, right? So I tend to go off a Matrix, and what I do is if I don't have enough IEM units, I'll put it on a macro on the Digico, so I can switch whoever mix to that Matrix system. So if anyone goes down, I can hit the macro with their name on it, and that mix goes to that Matrix, and then give them the Matrix pack.
Amazing.
But I like to have kind of two systems like that, depending on how many band members there are. But yeah, that's how that's my standard setup, is to do it off a Matrix and then with macros to switch everybody to the Matrix mix.
So obviously with front of house guys, I've been asking system of choice. Obviously, ears are obviously your domain. So I'm assuming from what we've said that you're very much a sure PSM 1000 man.
I am, just from I've been through them all. Started with the 600 and then the 700.
So is it just familiarity, or is it sonic quality that you're looking for, or rather, in an in-ear, are you prioritizing RF stability and the utility side of it, or are you prioritizing the sonic side of it, or is that something a lot of time the artist would choose? The age-old difference between Sennheiser and Shaw and things like that. Do you have that dictated by the artist sometimes?
I would say yes. Definitely. And I think, back when the 600, 700 thing, I always thought the 600 sounded quite a bit better than the 700 did, except the 700 had, I forget, two banks of, 14 channels. So you had much more channel agility. And when you started to need it, and I think now what happens is you need the best of both worlds, because you got to be able to tune that thing in so it works. And if it doesn't transmit a frequency clean, who cares what it sounds like? It's not working anyways. So you got to have the best of both worlds. And I used the Sennheiser 2000 series for a little bit, probably 5 or 6 years till the PSM 1000 came out. And then, I've been on the 1000, but I also, I'm also interested in the new, God, I can't remember the name right now. What is the new one from I think they're Italian company. I just saw them at NAMM. It's been a few months. God, I can't think of the name. Sorry. But there's another company out there I'm interested in looking at.
Okay. I'll tap you up on that at some point when you remember.
Yeah, I just can't believe I can't remember the name. But there's a new company and I'm interested, and we'll see where the technology goes and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Shure is always my the 1000 is definitely my go-to for frequency agility, sound, pack construction, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then obviously there's a lot of artists that are swayed by certain things with the pack as well, notched pots, or certain things they get used to how a pack sounds at a certain point. How much of that are you taking into account? I've worked with people before that and again, you're getting paid to do a job, so you're never going to challenge the artist, but they're saying, well, I can hear it when it gets to 6 or above, that's when it sounds great. So are you doing that, things like that, and then you're kind of trimming their mix so it hits the right point where they want to have the pack and things like that? How much of that are you getting involved with?
Yeah, sometimes that happens with some artists. They don't want to mess with the volume knob. They want it all the way up. You know what I mean? Just so that's just it. It goes all the way up. That's where they want it, and it's done. But no, I set everything up so pretty much halfway up is the sweet spot, and they can go a hair above or hair below. And that's pretty much where it is. And everybody, I guess other guys or other people bands I've worked with, they must have been doing it the same way, because I don't hear many complaints about that or not. But yeah, sometimes, you get that sweet spot that they like, that's like they can't get the knob there or something, you know what I mean? So you have to, look at your gain structure and figure a few things out, but it usually lands right where it needs to be, knock on wood.
So throwing something together nice and quick, for example, a new artist, and you don't have the rehearsal time, you throw in a festival or something, and so you obviously have your gain structure, and then you're setting it so, or rather, are you setting it so you're taking their focus, if it's a guitar player or a singer or something, you're taking what they're doing and placing that in the mix, so when they are at 12 o'clock, that is that their kind of main reference point, and then you build everything around that.
Yes, it's always, to me, it's always at that noon spot. You can go a click higher, click lower, depending on earpieces, all that kind of stuff. I'm mainly lucky enough that, all the artists I work for, everybody's mainly on the same earpiece, at least the same company's earpiece. I'm a big fan of JH Audio. I love their products. I like the way they sound. I like their service. I like everything about the company. And, I'm loyal to them for that. And, I just know how those pieces react, how they're going to sound. And that's just always been the way I set it up. And no one's really ever challenged me too much on it. I think they look at it. And then I usually, if they go higher or lower, I'll take a picture with my phone to see where they're at. So I know when they come up on stage, it needs to be there. Make sure their tech or my tech or whoever can put that knob right where it's got to be before they, tape it up or do whatever that artist needs to, keep that pack in the same spot all night, not just the volume, but the pack itself, So, and the cable plugged in, whatever system they have to do that, it's right on.
So you still, right before the show, are you obviously rechecking your RF, and are you walking? Is that something that you do, or is that something you have your tech do?
No, I think, I can't on a Maiden because I'm doing it. I walk them real quick, make sure everything, there's a scan going. I look at it one more time, walk them real quick again. Also depends what I've done for the opening act. A lot of guys, we had the Raven Age out with Iron Maiden last late summer. And Raven Age, they didn't have a monitor guy. They were using, I think they were doing it from iPads off an Allen and Heath, I think, as a matter of fact. And they had a really nice, neat setup. And the bass player was doing the frequencies. Well, he would often say, "Hey, man, we're in a tough environment. I can't get any more frequencies." Well, I just shut off and give him mine. I have no problem shutting off and letting the band before me use mine. I mean, hey, I go up to, if he used mine, and I go to him, "Hey, man, how were they?" He'd go, "Oh, they're spot on. They're perfect, man." So I have no problem shutting off and giving them to the band before me. I know they're going to be off by the time I get on. I don't need them on. So I have no problem turning off and letting somebody else use them. Even at a festival early in the day, man, use them, tell me how they are. And I see a lot of guys that won't turn off, and I think, well, you're not using them. I'd rather have them use them and tell me if they're good or not, and then we'll go from there. So that's just my philosophy of checking them before. But I do check them before, and obviously always we walk the radio mic before, and even at line/tech check, we always walk it everywhere and be sure it's good.
Yeah,
I'll do stuff cupping the antennas and hiding it, and doing all that kind of stuff to be sure there's no dropouts and stuff.
And you put yourself, I'm assuming, a lot of the time on a separate, smaller antenna behind the main. Do you find that has any effect on if an artist is complaining about RF dropouts, things like that? Do you find that, obviously the main thing for them on a dome or a helical or whatever, and then because you're stood behind that, you're on a smaller antenna for do you find that references against any RF issues they have, or do they sometimes hear stuff that you don't? Or
yeah, that it definitely does, because you're on a separate antenna system. I know some guys won't do that, but on like Shinoda, I didn't do that. I was able to place the antenna where I wanted it, and I could get hit by it, and so could the stage. But on Iron Maiden, it's all due to the set. You know what I mean? I can't. I'm in a position, and the antenna's in a totally separate position, way in front of me, and really high. So I have to have a separate antenna. And I think it does, I'm not going to hear the dropouts they're hearing if they're occurring. But
how do you approach that then? How do you problem solve that if they're coming to you saying they're getting dropouts? Is it just straight away, just throw them on the matrix and just deal with that, you said? Or
straight on the matrix and go with it. But also, their tech's going to be on that frequency, at least part of the time, and they're going to be able to tell me. And they're usually in worse positions than the artist. The artist is kind of in direct line of the side of the antenna, where the techs are back behind inside of a set. And I know if they've been good and clean all day. I check with them always after our kind of roadie line check, sound check, and at set change. I go to each one of them. Are you okay? Frequency good? Any drop? No. Good. And they usually tell me before, and we have pretty good luck with that system.
Amazing. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just two final questions.
Yeah, sure.
To wrap up. Firstly, your biggest inspiration or influence in all of this is a mentor you had, or someone that really you really looked up to during this?
Yeah, there's probably a ton of guys. My time at Shoko, I just didn't mix. I was a tech. I did everything. I was, hang PA. I was the seventh man on a 4-man crew. You know what I mean? I did everything back then, from mixing on down, system engineer, everything. So I had a ton of guys back then. Learned an immense amount from, and that's really kind of what shaped in today probably how I mix, good or bad, and things that I do, good or bad. I mean, it was a totally different world back then, and those guys were, some guys were extremely hard on me. Some guys were nice. Some guys taught me stuff. Some guys wouldn't say a word. But all those people that I worked with back then definitely had a big influence on me, and probably the way I act, treat people on the road, or dealing with artists and all kinds of issues like that. I think I always looked at those guys. But monitor wise, there's so many good guys, so many great guys. One of my probably one of the biggest things, I was mixing Judas Priest on an Ozfest, and Ozzy came down ill, and they had asked Rob Halford to sing, and so Rob called me in the dressing room like at 1:00, hours before it was announced. He goes, "Hey, I'm going to be singing with Black Sabbath tonight. Just make sure I've got a solid mix in my ears, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to use my ears," because they didn't, at the time, I don't think anybody in Sabbath was on ears. I don't even know if they are now, but Ozzy wasn't. So John Roden was no longer with us. He was mixing Black Sabbath at the time on I think it was a Harrison show console back then. And we get to the showtime, and John's just stepped aside for me and let me take over. And I got to mix Rob doing Black Sabbath, and coming from John Roden, that was it's a pretty big honor. I felt pretty good, and he congratulated me at the end of the night, and he'd lean over my shoulder every once in a while, hit a cue for somebody or something like that. But he kind of let me take the helm, and that was a big thing that I remember in the middle of a tour, because Ozzy was sick. That was pretty good. Rob obviously killed it, did a great job. Yeah. And, we had a show and all the fans were happy. So there's a lot of guys, John Roden, Chris Wade Evans, just tons of mixers, even younger kids these days. I'll see these guys doing some stuff, and it's like, oh, geez, they've got it going on. I didn't know any of that when I was their age, or could do that kind of stuff. So, it could be anybody at any time, any place, but I've had a lot, definitely.
Amazing. Well, and what you said about, learning off people how to act, I suppose it leads me on to my final question, that and we're asking this to everybody, just one thing, be it a way you act, or way you conduct yourself, or something technical that you do in your mix, or whatever it may be, but one piece of advice that you think could help everybody that's listening, whether it be something about their mix or something, anything really, but that one killer piece of advice that you think could help people.
I did this band called Prophets of Rage, which was Rage Against the Machine with Chuck D and Be Real singing. I did them for quite a while from their inception. And there was another band that had opened on a U.S. tour we'd done for a few months through the U.S. And he said to me, "Man, when stuff's going down, I can't believe how calm you are." Well, I don't think I'm calm. You know what I mean? Inside, I'm going, "Oh man, I got it." But he said, "I'm looking calm." So I think when you're behind the monitor board, when the whole world's crashing down, you got to stay there and keep your head in the game. You got to stay calm. You got to always act and present yourself as you are in control, even when all hell's breaking loose. And I think admitting that, and always keeping your eye on the money out there, and never having your head down. I see a lot of monitor guys with their head down in the console. You got to know that console so your head is up. You spend it down, you're going to have guys tapping you on the shoulder, running around, doing this, doing that. I try to keep it so no one's ever running at me, yelling from the side at me, any of that kind of stuff's going on. I try to keep the whole place in a calm atmosphere. If anybody needs something, you just ask. Nobody needs to be running around. Hopefully nothing's ever that bad, but try to keep it calm. Even when everything is at its worst, and keep your eye out there and keep your head up and not down in the console. That's one of my biggest probably pet peeves of younger guys when you're mixing monitors. I get it. You got to look down sometimes, but try to create your workflow and your work system so everything's close, you know where it's at, to keep your head straight out and show them that there's confidence over here. Yeah, nothing's wrong. And if there is, we've got it. No problems. We've got it. So that's probably my biggest thing, and like I said before, is listening to the artist. I see monitor guys, bands trying to explain what's going on, and they're talking over them and not listening and all that kind of stuff. And everybody, oh, he's crazy. He didn't hear that. But you know what? Most likely if they heard it, they heard it. You know what I mean? And it's your job to kind of figure out what they heard. If it's, even an ear coming out or hearing some extraneous noise somewhere, they're not just saying that to say it to you. They've obviously heard something, and you need to kind of listen and figure out what it is. So listening and not talking over people and going that route is, yeah. And I think that's all part of keeping that calmness and that, keeping that world free of all the, running around and extraneous stuff going on. I think that definitely is my biggest advice to anybody standing in the line of fire over there on stage left or stage right, wherever the monitors may be.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. Thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you, and thanks so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get back out there soon. Hopefully this doesn't last much longer.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks so much again, Tater. That was amazing. Thanks for being part of this. I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to us. Again, thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the usual places. So please share it, and please like and subscribe and all of that stuff. Please tune in next week, 7:00 at tpi.com, and we'll be speaking to John Delph, who is front of house engineer and a studio owner, and has recently taken the trip back to analog. And I think it's a really interesting interview. It was a really fun one to do. So hope to see you there. Thanks ever so much. Bye.